Greetings, everyone. I'm Pete Calandra, and welcome to episode 10 of Inside Track, which is my weekly live stream music education lesson. So I've been a little bit absent the past few weeks, been very busy with the end of the semester at the Copeland School of Music at Queens College and the City University of New York, and finishing up a 3-episode mini-series for the NBC Peacock streaming service. So all that stuff ended last weekend, and I've had some time to decompress a little bit. And the first thing I did was, of course, I tore down my studio, and I'm about halfway through setting it up again. But I've got everything needed for today's stream here. So, hey, Mark, good to see you. So I'm a little bit latency. You know, you might type something into the chat. It might take a minute for me to see it, but I have it over on the far right, left-hand side right now, so I'll have to turn my head to see it. But good to see you here. So if you're new watching this after the fact, please like this video. It helps. Subscribe, ring that bell, share it anywhere you'd like. And today's topic, I'd like to talk about creating hybrid orchestral music. Now, we live in really amazing times for a composer, because if you were a composer even 50 years ago, you couldn't really realize, unless you were some sort of doing concrete music or you were doing tape-based music, you really had a tough time, or if you were into electronic music, a tough time hearing your compositions. But now pretty much everybody can hear what they're writing, and the level of representation varies. Obviously, if you're just putting something into a notation program, you know, acoustic instruments will sound okay. If you're sequencing, you can make things sound better. And some music is more conducive to being created completely inside the computer than others. So, for example, big bands, jazz, still not really great with the sample libraries for that, in my opinion. But with orchestral music, you can certainly create incredibly effective music. And what's also amazing about this time is the amount of other material and other sound generating methods that you can combine with orchestral music and to create hybrid compositions. And you can realize these things and hear them yourself. And this is very important for media composition, because you hear that in film scores all the time. You hear orchestral instruments, you hear sound design, you hear electronic instruments, you hear rhythm section stuff. And additionally, you know, it's kind of interesting. The record industry, such as it is today, the recording industry, they have to have a label, you know, a stylistic label. This is, you know, new wave, this is punk, this is hardcore, this is rap, this is heavy metal, this is hair metal, this is, you know, southern rock, this is blues, this is jazz fusion. And they have to do this stuff because they want to be able to label things in order to market it to people they're trying to sell the stuff to. But as a composer, do you really have to worry about that? I guess you do if you want to market your stuff, but I'd rather just write the music that I'd like and that I want to create and use all the tools available to me, because I have a very broad palette of music that I like. I like orchestral music. I like jazz music. I like some pop music. I like ethnic music. I love reggae. I love blues. I like electronic music. I like ambient music. I like, you know, all sorts of stuff. I like ethnic music. It's just, and so why should I limit myself to just being able to just stick inside of one box? And the other thing I want to talk about when you're doing this, and it'll become apparent, well, there's two things actually, but the first thing is that you should write, or you should create music that sounds good, right? That should be your goal. It shouldn't be to write music that sounds like it's a real orchestra playing it with, like, you know, all the parts being set out exactly like an orchestral score, because that may be really great if you're going to have live players. But what I'm talking about here is creating a complete composition inside the box. And sometimes using ensemble patches is much more preferable than using, like, for example, individual string sections, right? It's just something about having all those players in the room playing together. And you have to write differently for that than you do for the ensemble, because you have to be careful if you've got an ensemble of, like, let's say 24 string players in a chamber group, and you're playing 4-note chords. All of a sudden that's 96 players, right? So you have to take all this stuff into account. So, and then the other thing is that when you're creating music that has different styles to it or different timbres to it, it's best to conceive of it as a whole. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's say you're doing something that has electronic instruments tucked in with orchestral instruments. It's best to conceive of the electronic instruments as part of the orchestra rather than just adding them on afterwards as an affectation. It's better to think of, if you're going to write music that has ethnic instruments, to consider them as part of the ensemble and how do they fit in with the ensemble, rather than, let's say, write a piece of orchestra music and then have a couple of solo lines for sitar thrown on top of it, right? That doesn't really work from my perspective. So give me 1 second here. Let me look at the chat. Hey, IP, hi Opus, good to see you guys here. So anyway, let's get into it. So I've got in the description box below the names of the 3 pieces that we're going to look at today. So the first piece we're going to look at is a piece from my 2018 album titled Invictus Bellator. Well, the album is titled Carpe Noctem, and this piece is entitled Invictus Bellator. So this is a album that I did, which is sort of sacred orchestral music with some choir and some electronic elements. And so this first piece has a couple of sections to it. I'm not going to play the whole piece. I'm just going to play a bit. I'm going to move to another section, and then I'm going to move to it like towards the end a little bit, and then I'll go through it in detail. So let's just take it from the top. Obviously, this is the introduction to this piece. All right, so we'll go through these sections in a little bit more detail, but let me just jump ahead a little bit too. So that's the first part. Let's go to the bridge. And I'll go over this middle section, and then I want to take it from the outro a little bit so you can just get a taste of this. All right, so this is a piece, right? As I said earlier, it's for large orchestra, and all this stuff is sampled and sound designed. And I've got a lot of Spitfire audio product in here. The choirs are from 8DO, and I've got stuff from, I believe I've got some Spectrasonics. I used, these are all audio. So this is the final mix session. It doesn't have any of the MIDI information in it. But the audio, let's see, the Rhodes is from Scarby. It's the EP88S, which I love. And then some of these pad sounds up at the top here, they're from Omnisphere, I believe. So let's go back to the beginning. Now, I started off with this real interesting sound design thing. Well, at least I think it's interesting, which are these red tracks here. And let's just solo these. All right, so what I've got here is a tubular bell that I recorded as audio. And I played around with the envelope, so it's got a slower attack, and I pitched it down an octave. That's this track here. And then this right here is a sound that I created. Right, this is a Zen bell from Berkeley, California Zen Center. It's played by my friend Ross, and I had my iPhone with me. I was visiting him out in California. I live in New York, by the way, and I think this was like 4 years ago. And I had my phone with a stereo mic on the phone, and I stuck. He was playing this thing, and I captured it from inside the bowl, and then I brought it into the computer, and I did some sound design on it. Right, so right away we're starting off with these like sort of just ethereal sounds that are not what you would hear in a typical orchestra. And then I've got this purple track here, which is the Rhodes. Right, so this is right, so that's pulsing. And what I did with this was, I've got a couple of Rhodes tracks, but I've got this going through this envelope generator called Gatekeeper. And you can hear it doing it in tempo with the track. So I've got that in there, and I make extensive use of that Gatekeeper in this track. And then down, way down here, I've got the Ola Arnefold's chamber strings. So these are chamber Evos. And then chamber waves above that. Right, so this gives just like some motion to the sound, and it gives us a really nice evolving sound that sort of layers in. Oh, and then there's these spectral scrubs also from the LCO library, also from Spitfire. So let's listen to that with these other strings. So you see how all that stuff unfolds over time, and then that layers in really well, I think, with the bell tones. Let's see. Oh, I've got this soloed. Okay, here we go. And so things unfold one after the other. All right, so that gives us a really, what I think, a nice start. And then right here, there's a solo cello to let us know that we're going in an orchestral. And this is the alternative solo cello from Spitfire. That's this track here. And then while that is happening, so you see what I'm doing here with this is I'm layering things in so that they're almost like waves one comes in, and gentle waves, not like big tsunami waves, but gentle waves. One comes in, and as that one's coming in, the next one starts, and then the one after that starts, so that like one event happens, and then a few seconds later another event happens, and they overlap. And that's sort of how I build up the beginning of this piece. So when that cello comes in, there's also some sounds up here that also happen. So this is a pad sound. So this is the sound. And then when I put it through this rhythmic gate, right, it's envelope. See what it does to that? It's really cool. And then another aspect of composing today is learning how to engineer and sound design and learning how to mix your music. I didn't do the final mix on this, but I did all of this stuff that you're hearing here, all these effects and all this. And so another thing that I do here is I use this thing called center, which if you're using headphones, you might be able to tell. But basically, this is a stereo field effect from waves, and I turn down the sound that's coming out the center, and that leaves just basically what's coming out the sides, left and right. And that gives you space for this to live, because this is combined with the Rhodes here, and it creates an aggregate sound. Oops, let's play that. And then on the downbeat. So that's kind of cool, and that goes in with that cello. And now our pulse starts, right? So that's comprised of these low drums. So what I've got here is low percussion from Spitfire Iceni. And it's just hitting softly on the downbeat. And then orchestral bass drum, and I think this is from their Joby Burgess. And then I've got an electronic bass, from like a drum machine bass drum. That right there. And you layer the three of those together, and you get a really cool aggregate sound. And that works well with these pulsing synths. So this is cool too, because once we get into we're not into the melody till right here, and that's happening down lower in the session here. But again, as the track unfolds, I'm bringing more instruments in to change the orchestration up. So this is this, and this here. And you see how they all layer together to create an aggregate rhythm. So let's listen to that with the orchestral elements added. And we're at the cello solo. Which is right here. And notice we've got the choir, brass. So here is a perfect example of using an ensemble patch, right? So this is the Iceni low brass. And you get that when you play it with low modulation values, you get this choir sound, which is really difficult to do if you were to orchestrate that out and do that with individual trombones and some French horns. Right? And then going along with that, we've got these flautando strings. Again, I think these are from the chamber strings, Spitfire. And notice that there's no vibrato on the strings. Right, you can control that stuff in the software, and I do that kind of work all the time. And then below that, we've got these octave strings from the Bernard Herrmann toolkit. And is anything else with the... That's our orchestra stuff, right? And then there's a little melodic figure on the acoustic piano, which I believe is a felt piano, and I believe it's the Noir felt piano by Native Instruments. That's this here. Now, you notice that when I start playing all the different sections of the instrument groups together, that they all fit, right? Each one works on its own and works in combinations with all the other instruments. And that's a really important facet of orchestration. Right, so here's all my electronic pulsing things. Works perfectly well with the piano. Low drums work perfectly well with the piano, right? The low brass, I think, works very well with the piano. And obviously, the strings. Right, so that's like a really important facet of this, that I'm treating each one of these food groups or these sections as a choir, and they're all doing something that's full, even if it's just one instrument playing. You know, the part works on its own. It has its own integrity, internal integrity and structure. And when you play it with any other combination of instruments, they all work together. Now, that's for this kind of a piece. Obviously, there's going to be times when you want a clash if you're doing something for film and you want instrument groups to work against each other. But you have to have the control over that to be able to do that and to know when that is appropriate. All right, so let's move ahead to another section. So let's go to the bridge here. Okay, so where's our choir? Yes, there's a lot of instruments. Here we go. Okay, so that's highlighted. Here we go. Here's our choir. So this is something with a syllable builder, and I just put together some syllables that sounded really good. Oh, thank you, Blanca. Well, Mark, it's not a mistake. It's something, you know, you basically, what I would say is that your palette is going to be something that you build up over time. Those libraries that you mentioned there are not going to go anywhere, right? So you just wait for the sale and you listen and you think about which one might be more effective for you. You know, I have certainly all the ensemble. I have certainly all the libraries that are broken up into individual sections. I certainly have all those, and I certainly use those at times, you know. But the ensemble sections really help, especially if you're under a deadline and it's going to be in the box with very few live players. I can just jam things in with two hands much quicker than just going through each individual part. For me, as a keyboard player, it really helps out. All right, let's, so we got that choir going, right? And notice right there, I changed the text. So if we're not to solo that, right? So this is. Right, so the second time through I add these little pizzicato celli. And then once we get to the bridge, I'm going to totally change the texture, right? So I've got these spiccato strings there. Right, so the see how they fit with the pizzicato? And then I've got these sul tasto tremolos here. Right, so there's a little overlap there just to help us get into the next section. That's this here. And the sul tasto tremolo come back in. And I believe that that's from the Ambient 5. And then there's this Whisper Swarm, which is also from Spitfire. Just adding some randomness to that with our choir taking the center stage. Yeah, and notice I give all my pulsing synths a little break there. All right, so that's pretty cool with that. Let's move a little bit forward and to the end section here where I try to make it a little bit bigger and a little bit more epic. Hey, John, good question. I actually have, if you look on my on my YouTube page, I've got 3 or 4 videos where I talk about harmony. I talk about intervallic harmony, and I'm actually going to do another one, another video in maybe next Friday, or it might be a bespoke video that I upload where I talk about using triads with shell in the right hand and shells in the left hand to build up. It's piano centric, but it can be applied to all this stuff. So thank you for subscribing, John. Appreciate it. Yeah, there's definitely at least 3 videos where I talk about harmonies and chord progressions, and there's going to be another one in the next week or 2. All right, so let's listen to the percussion that I've got here. So this is all the orchestral percussion. So I've got some Hans Zimmer stuff up here, right? With the orchestral snare. So the Hans Zimmer stuff is the medals, the buckets, and the darabuka, right? So that's just doing the high-pitched stuff, and then I've got a snare. And then I layer that with heaviosity damage drums, right? Now, this is something when you're doing drums like this, is to remember that those high-pitched things are the ones that are going to be they're better to be busy with the high stuff if you're going to have a big, thick drum patch or part. And then notice the damage drums. Tick-a-dum, 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 tick-a-dum. There's a lot of space in that. And then there's this low percussion in Iceni again. And then right over here, at this point, I have a frame drum ensemble come in. So let's listen to that. Right, so I am playing the dum-dum, but I'm leaving some space in that, and that works really well in concert with the damage drums. So that's these 2 tracks here. Add the snare drum to that. And then, you know, just to make things a little bit more, to add a little bit to the electronics, I've got in the low register that electro bass drum, just to give a little bit more snap. And then what's this over here? Oh, timpani. Now right here, let's take a listen to the pianos, okay? So I'm not sure if you can hear this unless you're wearing headphones, but this piano's going back and forth, left and right. And this is a different piano than the original piano. That's this guy right here. Sorry. And then I'm using Pan Man. And then this piano here is the same part as this one, but it's a little different tonally. I add this little bit of drive with this Devil Lock from Sound Toys. So again, this is where being an engineer and knowing about sound design can really enhance and make your sounds a little bit more original. And that's orchestration, and that's 21st century orchestration. And then I've got this piano here, playing the melody, right? And see, this is see how that fits in perfectly with the, well, I think it does anyway, with the piano. Right, so it's an aggregate rhythm, and see, that's a really, I just want to keep driving that point home about that kind of working all the different parts working together. So let's go down. I want to try to find something else. Okay, so this is another thing that I've done in this end part here, and I've got this, I don't know if you can hear this, but I've got a sine wave that I played on, I believe it was on my Mini Moog, I think, or it was either the Mini Moog or the subsequent 37. I forget which one it was, but I definitely played it on an analog synth. Just adding some, like, you know, opening up the range of the instrument, but you got to be really careful. If you notice that the volume on this is way, way, way down. Whoops. Yeah. So it's just in there as a little touch. And then the other thing I want to show you is in the electronic area. Oh, so then at the end here, I start adding some pitched percussion, right? So again, an ensemble, just eighth notes there in the marimba. Part doubled with the vibes. And this part in the harp is very complementary to the piano. So let's go back down to our piano parts. So see how those all fit together to create a really cool texture? Let's go up to these purple guys here. So I've got a new Rhodes patch right here, right? Right, and it's just really, I've got this Devil Lock Deluxe and I'm crushing it a little bit. And so if I were to bypass this, and see how weak that sound, well, it's a nice sound, but that's just so much better. And again, I've got my gatekeeper friend helping me with the pulse. and then this berimbau. Yeah, this is from Omnisphere by Spectrasonics. And then this guy is pulsing also, as is this. It's cool to add the sections in one at a time so you can hear how it really all fits. Choir. Okay, another thing I want to talk about here is layering different section sizes. So this is my chamber strings right at that point. And you can hear that I'm changing the dynamics, and I'm also changing the intensity of the vibrato in there. It's all done with my little controller here. You know, I'm playing with one. I usually overdub that after the fact, but to differentiate between the sound of the ensemble here and the sound of the ensemble here, I've added the Saucony String Quartet as an ensemble. It just adds a little bit tiny edgy in the upper frequencies. Yeah, that's ARC by Orchestral Tools, that is. So you see, I combine different libraries from different companies, no problem. All right, so I think that's 40 minutes on this one tune. That's more than I wanted to spend on it. But there's a lot to talk about here. Some good questions there and comments. Definitely add some questions. My monitor for seeing the comments is over on the left. Let's take a look at another track. I think I was going to do... well, let's just close this. Let's just hope that Pro Tools doesn't crash. And we'll do 96 effect. All right, so this is a track I wrote recently. I wrote this in April. And the way I've got this set up is that all these gray tracks up here, this is the MIDI tracks that I wrote this piece with. And I made them all into, I reduced them all down to this many stems, these blue tracks. So we're going to not be as detailed as the last one, but we'll still be able to get a sense of this. And if I need to listen to an instrument separated out, I can. It's not that big a deal for me to make the MIDI instruments active. So what this is a cue from this mini-series I just finished called The 96 Effect. It's going to be streaming live on the Peacock service from NBC, I believe, starting on June 17th. All 3 episodes will be available. And it's a really great story. It's a sports documentary about the 96, the female Olympic teams from the 96 Olympics, American. And it's really inspiring, some great performances by the women. And there's a lot of other information. It's not just about the competition. It's about the people in the teams and how everything just sort of, there's a lot to it. I don't want to give too much of it away before it's on air, but it's just really, really well done. And I wrote 57 cues, about 90 minutes worth of music for the 3 episodes. They're not long. The whole series is about 100 minutes long. So they're 3, like 30-minute, 35-minute, some of them. episodes. And the music, a lot of what I wrote was orchestral. And I wanted to get it's sports music. And sports music has a lot of rhythm section in it. And also, this is about something that was 25 years ago. I wanted it to sound retro. And there's some stuff I do in this track that goes back to like 70s. But retro is retro. I didn't really want to put a date. I didn't want to make it sound like Alanis Morissette, which was very big in 1996. Her album came out then. I just wanted to have something that sounded a little bit retro in the score. And so let's take a listen to this. This is only a 2-minute piece, so there won't be as much to discuss as in the last one, but it's still good. All right, let's stop it there. So obviously, this definitely sounds like sports music to me, highlight music. You know, there's competition going on. You're watching the recap. And I've done a lot of that kind of music in my life. As a matter of fact, most of my composing career has been doing sports music, which is very lucrative, can be. And it also can be really artistically satisfying because there's a lot of drama in sports. There's a lot of backstory, good documentaries. And I really, it's been interesting. So let's talk about, so there's basically strings and brass and some orchestral percussion with a rhythm section, right? And I'm doing kind of like a shuffle beat, right? Something in triplet feel. So let's take a look. Let's look at the bass here and take a solo that out. Thanks, John. All right, so what am I doing with the bass here? So to look at that, let's go up here to where the bass is. So I'm using this. This is the Scarby Rickenbacker bass. And let me make this active. Okay, so you can see that I've got this plugin, the Decapitator, which adds overdrive. And then I'm using Impact, which is a really driving compressor to make the sound really funky. So this is the Scarby Rickenbacker bass, and it's really it's perfect for this. So let's make that inactive again. So you see, I'm taking the sound and I'm affecting it and making it even more edgy, right? So it's just really, and I'm really careful about the duration of the notes. It's ba, ba, ba. They're long and fat and just really just right in the pocket there. And then that goes really well with the kick drum. Just banging those quarter notes, right? It's like you're at the disco. So, and then to make the rhythm section work, there's some orchestral percussion. So again, this is hybrid, right? So this is, that's marching band drums. That's from the is it from the originals or from one of the labs? I forget which one it was, but that's definitely Spitfire marching drums. And then a nice big drum fill here. And I think that's from Easy Drummer, so those toms there. And so that gets us set up, right? And then right at that drum fill, there's this really big brass and strings. Right, and we got the low pitched, and then with the strings. And what's cool about that is that sort of complements the bass. And then the very next measure, we get the higher strings. Come right in with the groove. So the lower strings are complementing the bass. And then I've got that blues, based on a blues scale, right? The melody part. So I've got that F sharp in there, right? And then the second time through, we've got the low with brass. Oh, the high and the low brass, right? Beat it, bam, right? So that the high gives us the accent, and then not on the downbeat, we got that bam. So that kind of works really cool with the strings. And notice that it's not all the way through with the brass. I leave the middle section out. So it's the first measure, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Now we're with the low. And then punctuate the end. Right? So that whole bit's in minor. And, you know, like you want the heroic victory, right? Like where good stuff is happening. You're working like a team, everything. So you go up to the relative major. It's very simple. It's not rocket science. There you go. So those French horns are from Orchestral Tools, the Berlin brass. And then the trumpets, I believe, are from Abbey Road, from Spitfire. All right, let's listen to that with the strings. Right, just pounding those quarter notes in, right? And just that big fat bass driving the whole thing. And I do a couple little triads there occasionally. Doom, doo, da, boom. It's sort of like. Right, so this is a cool section here. Right, with the Wurlitzer electric piano. Oh, I didn't go over the keyboards during the verse. It's funny. I've played that kind of figure so many times in pop bands when I was in undergraduate school. But also, you wouldn't believe it, but there's keyboard parts like that all over Les Miserables. And when I played the show on Broadway and in the national tour, I played those a lot. It's kind of like a polyrhythm. But again, you see how everything fits in? So let's go back to that middle section here. A little chromatic thing there. And you can really hear the bass, how it's just squashed and it's got that pumping feel to it, right? So there's some side chain activity going on from the kick drum, I believe. No, is there side chain going on? Where is it coming from? I forget. Of course, I got to bring that up. And that's basically the piece. You know, it just repeats that whole bit. It's just a 2-minute track. So adding rhythm section, adding different kinds of scales than you would hear in orchestral music, the blues scale, doing something with a shuffle groove, which is not something you would typically hear with an orchestral thing. And yeah, there you got it. That's Sports Music 101. I am actually going to do a live stream on writing sports music, and I'm going to use some of the theme songs that I've written for Fox Sports, ESPN, and others. So that'll probably be in a few weeks. All right, so let's move on to the last bit. Close session. And again, if you're new here, please like and subscribe. Appreciate anybody leaving comments. And if you're watching this on replay afterwards, leave a comment in the comment section, and I will certainly get around to answering them. All right, let's just see. Okay, good. All right, so this is the title track from my 2014 album called Inner Circle. So with this, I'm blending 3 disparate elements together. I've got a string quartet. I've got kind of like a jazzy feel to it, and also Afro Cuban music. So let's play a little bit of this, and then we'll talk about it. I'm going to skip around with this one like I did the first one. Will do, Mark. All right, so this is the introduction. Let's go forward to the first verse. Cello. Live cello. The acoustic bass and the string quartet are live players, and then the rest I'm playing. I played the ride cymbal on this, and piano and Rhodes and the other thing. So, yep. The other thing being this guy here. This is done in Omnisphere. All right, let's go to the bridge. Has anybody seen that confounded bridge? All right, great. So let's break this down. So you can hear there's a string quartet. You can hear that there's sort of like a Pat Metheny-ish kind of jazzy thing to it a little bit. You could hear that there's like a little bit of neoclassical with the lines that are played. Some of the chords that the string section plays, like over here. Right, those are sort of drop two voicings, which you find in jazz a lot. But let's get down to the Afro-Cuban element to this. So there are two parts to Afro-Cuban music, and I wouldn't consider myself an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I do know a little bit about it, and I've certainly played it. And the two main parts that are apparent that are in this particular piece of music are the tumbayo and the montuno. So the tumbayo is the bass part, and then the montuno is the piano part, repetitive rhythm. So, and then there's also something called a clave. So there's three parts. So let's talk about the clave is the 3-2 or 2-3 rhythm that are played on claves, most like typically bump, 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 or bump, 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 or bump, 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 right? And there's a bunch of claves, but the whole bit is written around that. The bass fits in perfectly with that. The montuno fits in perfectly with that. But with this piece, which I wanted also to be a little bit ambient, I do that kind of montuno in this blue track here, which is called Steamy Keys, which I think is the name of the patch that I tweaked a little bit from Omnisphere. Down, down. So if I've got this H delay, if I turn that off, right, so you can hear that that's a clave kind of a figure, and then when I add the H delay, we get much more rhythm. I've got it on a dotted eighth note. And again, sound design, engineering, enhancing your composing. So that's our montuno, our clave, and then this is a kind of montuno. Here we go. There's our montuno. Dun 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 ka-doom bum bum ba-doom bum bum. You've all heard that rhythm before. Bum ka-doom bum 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 ba-doom bum bum ba-doom bum bum. And then the bass comes in with that, and the bass is being played by the incredible Tom Barney, New York City legend. Played with McCoy Tyner, Miles Davis. Was in Steely Dan for a long time. Recorded with so many people. And now he's in The Lion King. That's where I met him. Great guy, great bass player. So he's not doing a tumbayo yet. He's just marking my downbeats. And giving a little anticipation. See that right there? It comes in before the downbeat. That's giving you the sort of like a little taste of the tumbayo. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. So doing that little push there, that's what a tumbayo does when it gets in its full flowering. So in other words, he's building up to that, right? And that's part of the arranging. Two, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2. See that it's landing on the and? 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2. So it's 3, 4. So you see how he's anticipating the downbeat? And then sometimes he locks in with the downbeat. It's all planned out. So in other words, when you're anticipating a downbeat and doing that little push, it gives a drive. And then when you actually land on the downbeat, that really gives you a nice something to lock into. Oh, okay, that's where it goes. And then if we look at the bridge here, 2, 3, 4, 1. This is more of a tambayo bass line, too. So if I go a little bit before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. See, he's right in between. Everything's on the offbeat. And that fits in really nicely with the Rhodes. Oh no, I'm actually playing the melody there. Right, so there's no actual montuno going on there. And so I do something here that you not really shouldn't do with this kind of music, is my left hand is doubling the tambayo on my piano. Right, that's not typically done. But again, I like the way it sounded. And notice the drums, typically in this ensemble there'd be timbales and congas and other instruments, but I just wanted a nice, simple ride cymbal played with a brush. Because if I take the ride cymbal out, it's not as... And then now the second half of the bridge, we got the cello playing a really beautiful melody. I think, anyway. That's Peter Prosser. He teaches at Mannes College of Music in Manhattan. He also is a conductor. He plays orchestral music, plays on Broadway. Great guy. I went to college with his wife at Queens College, Lisa Arcus. She's a fantastic flute player. Yeah, so let's listen to this with this beautiful cello solo. Back to the intro. Now let's take a look at the string quartet. So let's see. Actually, it's more like a string quintet. So we've got or a sextet. We've got Tom on the bass, and then we've got Peter Prosser on the cello, and then playing the violas and the violin. So there's one viola track and 3 violin tracks is Ralph Farris. Ralph was in Lion King. That's where I met him when I was playing there. And he plays in a string quartet called Ethel. And he played one part at a time. And we did all this recording of live instruments in my New York City apartment, if you can believe that. Oh, and I do a little thing here at the end. I automate and bring the reverb up on this last chord, just to give it a sense of distance. Now, you can hear one thing that I want to talk about is the difference in textures. So things start moving right here. Right? I've got, and it's 4 and 5 note chords right there. All right. So here it's just 2 parts. It's the melody and the upper violin, and then the cello and the bass. So it's 3 parts. But over here, things start moving, and I thicken the texture out because I want that to drive us towards the end of the section into the next bit, right? So that's how you gain momentum, is by changing the orchestration and thickening things up like that. Thank you, Music to Motion. Appreciate that. They played so great. So that's, this is a little bit of an aside, but as some of you know, I spent most of my adult life living and working as a musician in New York City, a really busy keyboard player for many years. And then I dovetailed that with writing music for films and television. And one of the best things about my career as a pianist was that a keyboard player was that all the musicians that I met, like incredible musicians, I could go through a whole history of how Broadway used to be the dog work in New York City because there was so much work. And then now it's like the most desirable gigs to get. And you find people that are just incredibly talented and highly overqualified for the positions playing. And as someone who did that for a long time, I met all these amazing players. You become friends with these people because you're seeing them on a daily basis or multiple times a week, depending upon what's going on and where you're playing. And you can, everybody wants to play and record. And, I paid everybody to play on this stuff. And yeah, they did a great job. It's just amazing to surround yourself with that. And it's also inspiring when so many people are so good around you. You have to work really hard to make sure that you're up to their level, and it's really just, it's a good gut check on your own self. Do I fit in with those people? It's humbling. All right, so let's listen to the piano solo here. So I changed the form a little bit. So I've got that half montuno in the Rhodes. Right, and it's not really a tumbayo in the bass. It's just sort of like what do they call that, a passacaglia? And then he repeats it. Back to the bridge. And then the second time through the bridge, I changed the orchestration and I have the viola doubling the cello in the melody section. Oh, actually, no. I've got lots of strings. So, and then there's just the outro to this. Yes, Mark, there is nothing like live players if you've got the time to rehearse and they're the good players and a good space to record them with. I like having the option of live and sampled instruments. And that's the great time that we're living in now. All right, everyone. So everyone, thank you for all your comments. I think that's going to bring us to the end of this. Hopefully this has been enlightening to you and helpful in any way. Again, if this is afterwards and you're seeing this, or even if you've watched this now and you've got other questions, you can certainly leave them in the comment section below. I'll be back again next week with another one of these. Now that school and my projects are over, I've got a little bit more free time, and I'll be getting back to doing these every Friday. Yeah, so thank you everyone for watching. I've been Pete Calandra. Again, like, subscribe, ring that bell. And also some of you, if you're watching here, I noticed that people are posting a link to this up on VI Control occasionally. Thank you for doing that and spreading the word. The more views I can get, I can build my channel up, which has been very slow to do. But, my channel is not really targeted and focused in like many channels are. I do a bunch of different things because I've got a lot of interests. So it makes it difficult to build up a specific following, like as if I was a van life channel or somebody who just did sample library reviews, right? All right. Thank you again very much. This is episode 10 of Inside Track, and I've been Pete Calandra. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will catch you later. Okay, thank you. Can't read that from as far away. Mondo Strat and Blanco. Yeah, thank you everyone for watching. I'm looking at the... oh, and Barat, nice to see you here, sir. Good. Great to see everyone. Thank you so much, and I will catch you on the next one.